The first chapter of my life started in what some might call a home, but to me, it felt more like a strict group with unbreakable rules. Dad and Mom were like characters from an old-fashioned movie. Dad was the boss, and Mom acted as the enforcer of his rules. "Sabrina, listen here," Dad would say, his deep voice echoing through our small house. "In this world, a woman listens. That's her strength." Mom would nod in agreement and add, "Your voice isn't your power. Your silence is. Remember that." I was Sabrina, their only child, trapped in their web of rules. No friends over, no loud music, and absolutely no talking back. Grandma was the only one who felt different. She lived nearby, but seemed like she came from a whole other world. Whenever she visited, our house felt lighter and less strict. One day, she came over her usual cheerful self, trying to sneak me a chocolate bar. But Dad wasn't happy. "This girl needs discipline, not fairy tales," he snapped. Grandma didn't back down. "Discipline's one thing, Dave. Crushing her spirit is another," she shot back, sharper than I'd ever heard her before. Their arguments were the background noise of my childhood, a mix of Dad's stern lectures and Grandma's attempts to bring some happiness into my life. It wasn't all bad, though. Mom taught me how to cook, saying it was the key to a good marriage. "A man wants a woman who can feed him well," she'd say as she stirred a pot, and I chopped vegetables. Dad's lessons, on the other hand, were all about obedience. "A quiet wife is a happy life," he'd say with a chuckle, never realizing how serious he sounded. I quickly learned to stay quiet and keep my thoughts to myself. School was my only escape, the one place where I could feel a little bit like myself. Even there, I was the quiet one, barely noticed by teachers and ignored by the other kids. They didn't bother with the girl, who hardly ever spoke. Then one day, everything changed. I was 15, hiding in my room as always, when Grandma suddenly burst in, her eyes blazing. "Pack a bag, Sabrina. You're coming with me," she said firmly. Dad's angry voice boomed from the living room. "You can't take her. She's our daughter." But Grandma stood tall and didn't back down. "I won't let you crush her spirit with your rules. She's coming with me," she said, her voice unshakable. Before I knew it, I was on my way to Grandma's house. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe freely. Her home was the complete opposite of what I was used to. Books were everywhere, music played all the time, and the house was filled with laughter, so much laughter. "Here, you'll learn to speak, to stand up for yourself, and to be who you are," Grandma promised. I believed her. For the first time, I dared to imagine a different kind of life. But breaking old habits wasn't easy. Even with Grandma's encouragement, I was still shy and withdrawn. I found comfort in the quiet world of the internet, teaching myself web design. It became my way to express myself without needing to speak. Life with Grandma felt like living on a different planet compared to my parents' house. She pushed me to find my voice, to speak up, but years of being silent didn't just disappear overnight. Then one day, she dropped a bombshell. "He's coming over for dinner next week," she said casually, like it was no big deal. I froze, my spoon hovering in midair. "What? Why?" "Because you're 31 and living like a hermit," she said matter-of-factly. "It's time you met someone." I panicked. "But I don't even know him. What if he's like Dad?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Grandma set her teacup down with a soft clink and looked at me. "Not everyone is like your father, Sabrina. I've known his family for years. He's different." I wasn't convinced. "And what if I don't like him?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Then you don't like him," she said simply. "But at least give it a try, won't you?" Her eyes softened, silently pleading with me. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Thinking, what's the worst that could happen? The day he was supposed to come over, I was a wreck. I changed my outfit 4 times, paced until I was sure I'd worn out the carpet, and even considered pretending to be sick. "He's here," Grandma called out, her voice full of excitement. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before stepping into the living room. There he was, standing near the door, with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. He was taller than I'd imagined, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Hi, I'm Austin," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Sabrina," I replied, barely able to whisper as I shook his hand. Grandma swooped in, full of charm and warmth. "Let's have dinner." Sabrina made her famous lasagna. Dinner passed in a blur. Grandma led most of the conversation, while Austin talked about his job and hobbies, which surprisingly included a lot of outdoor activities. He seemed nice, normal even, and he really listened whenever I spoke, though I didn't say much. After dinner, Grandma left us alone in the living room, giving me a sly wink before she disappeared. "So, your grandma tells me you're into web design," Austin said, breaking the silence. I nodded, feeling a little more comfortable talking about something I loved. "Yeah, I've been doing it for a few years now." "That's cool." "I'm terrible with technology. Barely know how to check my email," he said with a laugh, a sound so easy and contagious it made me smile. We talked more after that, about everything and nothing. He asked about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my passion for design. He even shared funny stories about his attempts at cooking, most of which ended in disaster. It was easier than I thought it would be, and for the first time, I didn't want the evening to end. After a few dates, I realized I was falling for him, hard. It was something I'd never felt before, like a whirlwind that I couldn't stop. Austin turned out to be everything I never knew I needed. Then came the day he introduced me to his mother. She was polite, her smile tight, and her eyes studying me like I was some kind of puzzle. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Sabrina. Austin has told us so much about you," she said sweetly, though her tone had a sharp edge I couldn't quite figure out. "Thank you, Mrs. Andrew. It's nice to meet you, too," I said, doing my best to match her politeness. The wedding was simple, just the way we wanted it. But things took a turn when we moved into Austin's family home. Moving into Austin's family home felt like stepping back in time, straight into the strict rules of my childhood. His mother, Mrs. Andrew, wasted no time setting up her rules, and they loomed over me like towering walls. The first morning there, I woke up feeling uneasy. When I stumbled into the kitchen, Mrs. Andrew was already sitting at the table, looking like she was in charge of everything. "Good morning," I mumbled, still half asleep. "Morning, dear. Now listen," she said briskly. "We have a way of doing things here. You'll take over the kitchen duties, breakfast at 6 o'clock, lunch at noon, and dinner at 5 o'clock. And I expect the house to be spotless. Understood?" Her tone left no room for discussion. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Understood." Austin passed through the kitchen, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Thanks, babe. Mom's a great teacher. You'll learn a lot from her," he said casually before heading out. Every morning turned into a race. I'd wake up before sunrise, scrambling to make a breakfast that would finally meet her impossible standards. Then, I'd rush to my laptop to work on my web design orders. My days blurred into a non-stop cycle of cooking, cleaning, and working, only to start over again in time for dinner. Mrs. Andrew never helped. Instead, she walked around the house, pointing out any speck of dust or a dish left undone. Compliments were foreign to her. Criticism was the only language she spoke, always delivered with a sharp, judging tone. Things got worse when they discovered how much I was earning for my web design work. Suddenly, my income wasn't mine anymore. "You're part of this family now, Sabrina. It makes sense for you to contribute to the household," Austin said one evening, his hand outstretched for my bank card. "But I do contribute," I protested. "I cook, clean, and—" He cut me off. "Yeah, but money is different. It's for the household. For us." His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. From that point on, every penny I earned went straight into his account. I felt like I was disappearing, piece by piece, as I lost control of my life. The money I earned from long hours at my laptop, dealing with demanding clients who acted like their websites were the center of the universe, was no longer mine. It felt like a cruel joke. I was making good money, yet I had to ask Austin for cash just to buy groceries or basic household items. "Hey, I need some money for the market tomorrow," I'd say quietly, hating that I had to ask at all. "How much?" he'd reply, his tone always carrying a hint of suspicion, as if I was planning some secret escape. Just enough for the week's groceries and some cleaning supplies, I'd answer, trying to keep my voice steady. He'd hand me a small wad of cash, never quite enough. It was always just short, making sure I'd have to come back to him for more. I felt tied down, dependent, and powerless. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I said, I do. I was trapped in a cycle of servitude, working hard to earn money that fueled a household that didn't respect me. I lived under the constant watch of a mother-in-law who treated me like a maid, and a husband who agreed with her every word. Months went by, with me bending over backward to please Austin and his mom, yet nothing was ever good enough. Then came the breaking point, a Friday night dinner where I accidentally overcooked the pasta. Mrs. Andrews' voice was sharp, her words dripping with disdain. "This mush is what you call dinners?" I stood there, feeling like a child being scolded instead of a grown woman.
"Sorry."
"It just got away from me," I said softly. "Got away from you," she repeated, snorting as if I had made a joke. Austin chimed in, echoing his mother like a parrot. "Sabrina, you've been off your game. What's going on?" Their words hit me like a slap. I was juggling my web design work every spare moment I had, and still, they tore me down over one mistake. "I'm doing the best I can," I said, my voice barely audible. But it was like talking to a wall. "Best?" Austin laughed, short and harsh. His tone made it clear he didn't believe me. That night, something inside me snapped. It wasn't about the pasta. It was about me, about how I was losing myself, trying to keep them happy. I turned to a web design forum, of all places, and poured out everything I was feeling. Typing out my frustrations felt like releasing a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. One of the regulars, Jennifer, replied with something that stopped me in my tracks. "This sounds like psychological abuse, Sabrina. Have you ever looked into it?" Psychological abuse. I stared at the words, my heart racing. Could that really be what was happening to me? I spent the whole night reading articles and stories. It felt like I was reading my own life, but told by someone else. By morning, I was exhausted and confused when Grandma called me. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. "I'm just having a bit of a tough time," I said, trying to downplay everything. "Sabrina, you know you can tell me anything, right?" Grandma's voice was soft, full of worry. "I know, Grandma. I'm just figuring some stuff out." "Nothing major," I lied. I couldn't stand the thought of her worrying about me. After we hung up, I dove even deeper into psychology. I started reading books and articles in secret, hiding them from Austin and his mom. Every page felt like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing the truth about my life. The manipulation, the control, it was all there in black and white. But I stayed quiet. I didn't tell Grandma or anyone else how bad things really were. Then one day, everything changed. I went out to buy groceries, grateful for even a short escape from the stifling atmosphere at home. As I crossed the street, a car came out of nowhere. The impact was sudden and overwhelming. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. My body was covered in casts and bandages, aching all over. I was disoriented and scared, but grateful to be alive. That relief vanished the moment Austin and his mother walked into the room. Their faces weren't filled with concern or worry. They were angry. Austin spoke first, his voice sharp and full of venom. "Great. Just great. I've had to cook for myself because of this." "What were you thinking?" His mother, as cold as ever, added, "And I've been stuck cleaning up. You'd better not think you're just going to lay around here forever." I stared at them, disbelief mixing with the pain that pulsed through my body. "I was hit by a car. I have fractures," I said, my voice trembling. But they didn't care. Their words hit harder than any car ever could. "I can't just get up," I said weakly, but Austin cut me off sharply. "Excuses, always excuses with you. When will you stop pretending and start pulling your weight again?" Their cruelty was almost too much to handle, almost. But something inside me, something that had been growing stronger over the past few weeks, refused to break. At that moment, the doctor walked in, his face calm and professional. Austin wasted no time turning on him. "How long before she's back on her feet? We have a household to run," he demanded. The doctor looked at my chart and then back at them. She needs at least 3 months of rest. After that, we'll discuss rehabilitation. It won't be a quick recovery. Their outrage was immediate. 3 months? And who's going to pay for all this? Austin asked, his concern clearly not for me. Then he turned to me, his words as sharp as knives. If you think you're going to take it easy at our expense, you're wrong. If you're not back in a month, cooking and cleaning, we're done. Something incredible happened then. Amid the pain, fear, and disbelief, I felt a sudden clarity. And with it came a calm, steady voice I hardly recognized as my own. Then we're done. I want a divorce. The room fell silent. Austin's face turned pale, and his mother looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. She must have hit her head too hard, she muttered to him, her voice full of disbelief. They left shortly after, their dramatic exit as abrupt as their arrival. For the first time, I was alone with my thoughts and a new sense of freedom. The road to recovery was long and difficult, but it gave me something precious, clarity and a plan. A few weeks later, Austin showed up at the hospital with divorce papers in hand. His face was smug, as though he fully expected me to beg him to stay. Instead, I calmly took the pen in my right hand, thankfully not broken, and signed my name with surprising steadiness. "You'll be back," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You can't handle life on your own." He left a bag with my things and my laptop by the bed, a final gesture of dismissal. But instead of feeling discarded, I felt something else entirely. I felt a wave of freedom wash over me. I was finally free. Over the next few weeks, I moved back in with Grandma. She didn't ask for explanations or offer criticism. She just welcomed me with open arms. With her support, I found strength I didn't even know I had. But then, Austin and his mother showed up at Grandma's doorstep, demanding answers like they still had a claim on my life. "You can't just sue us," Austin shouted, waving a stack of papers in my face. "On what grounds?" I met his eyes, calm and steady. "Psychological abuse, for starters. And for taking my earnings without my consent. I have recordings, Austin. Everything." His face turned pale. "Recordings? Sabrina, please. You don't understand. This could ruin me." His mother, tears streaming down her face, joined in. "We didn't mean any harm. You have to forgive us." It was almost laughable to see them so desperate and afraid. For months, they had made me feel small and powerless. Now the tables had turned. "No," I said firmly. "I want you both out of my life. For good." As they stumbled away, Grandma turned to me, her face full of pride. "I never knew you had it in you," she said softly. "Neither did I, Grandma," I admitted. "But I do now." After shutting them out of my life, I felt a swirl of emotions, relief, anger, sadness. But above all, I felt triumph. I had stood up to them and used their own cruelty against them. The court date couldn't come fast enough. I was ready, armed with evidence and a newfound sense of determination. The courtroom was intimidating, with its high ceilings and quiet echoes. Austin was there, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. His mother sat beside him, her usual cold demeanor replaced by fear. When the case was called, I took a deep breath. My lawyer, a sharp and fearless woman, presented our case with precision. She laid out the evidence piece by piece, leaving no room for doubt. Austin's lawyer tried to spin the story, painting him as a supportive husband blindsided by my accusations. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood tall, facing the judge, Austin, and everyone in that room, ready to tell my truth. I stood there, my voice steady and strong. "Your Honor, I thought I was living in a loving home, but over time, it became my prison. The psychological abuse, the control over my finances, I have proof of all of it." Austin's lawyer quickly jumped in. "Your Honor, these accusations are exaggerated. My client has always had the best intentions." I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. Best intentions? Best intentions don't include secretly recording conversations and controlling every part of someone's life. The judge raised a hand, signaling for silence. He carefully reviewed the recordings, bank statements, and messages I had submitted as evidence. It felt like forever before he finally looked up and spoke. This court finds that Mrs. Andrew has suffered significant psychological abuse at the hands of Mr. Andrew and his mother. The evidence is clear and fully supports her claims. The ruling was in my favor. Not only was the divorce granted, but Austin and his mother were ordered to pay damages and return every cent they had taken from me. Outside the courthouse, Grandma wrapped me in a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered.
"Thanks, Grandma."
"It feels like I can finally start living my life," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Word spread quickly, as it always does in small towns, and even big cities. Austin's reputation took a serious hit after the court's decision became public. Once labeled an abuser, people started seeing him in a new light. His bosses didn't like the negative attention and demoted him. Clients? They disappeared without a trace. No one wanted to work with a man who treated his wife like that. As for his mother, the once dominant figure in her social circle, her influence crumbled. Friends, acquaintances, and even nosy neighbors began to avoid her. The throne she ruled from was gone, leaving her with nothing but her bitterness and a son whose life she helped ruin. As I began this new chapter of my life, I knew it was time to face the demons of my past and finally move forward. If I was ever going to truly move forward, I knew I had to face everything head-on. So, before I even thought about packing boxes or looking for a place by the coast, I found myself sitting in a psychologist's office, Dr. Sam's office, to be exact. It was a step I never thought I'd take, but there I was, ready to uncover the layers of my life that I'd kept buried for so long. Dr. Sam's office was calm and peaceful, the complete opposite of how I felt inside. The room was filled with books and plants, with sunlight streaming through the windows. I still remember that first session clearly. "So, what's been going on?" Dr. Sam asked gently, but directly. I sighed, feeling both nervous and relieved. Finally, I could talk to someone who might help me sort through the mess. Where do I even start? My whole life has been about pleasing others, staying quiet, being the good girl. And then my marriage, it was just more of the same, but worse. So much worse. Dr. Sam nodded, her voice calm and reassuring. "We'll take it one step at a time. You're here now, and that's what matters." Those sessions became my safe space, a place where I could face my fears, confront my past, and start to heal. It wasn't easy, far from it, but it was exactly what I needed. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to feel like I was regaining control of my life. One crisp morning, Grandma and I sat in the kitchen, making plans for my next steps. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the table where we had spread out our ideas. "So, where to first?" Grandma asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement and just a bit of mischief. "I'm thinking the coast," I said, smiling as I spread jam on my toast. "I've always wanted to live near the ocean. Fresh start, fresh scenery. That sounds lovely. And work? Are you going back to web design?" she asked, sipping her tea. I nodded. "Yeah, but on my terms this time. I'll do freelance, maybe learn some new skills along the way. Who knows? The sky's the limit." Grandma chuckled. "Just don't go skydiving on me, okay? My heart can't take it." I grinned. "No promises?" I teased, earning a playful swat with a napkin. The laughter, the light-hearted moments, it felt so good, almost healing. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. I packed up my things, said goodbye to the few friends I had made, and prepared for the move. Leaving the safety of Grandma's home was bittersweet, but the excitement of starting fresh was overwhelming. On the day I left for the coast, Grandma hugged me tightly on the doorstep. "Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you're never alone," she said. "I'll remember," I promised, fighting back tears. "Thank you for everything, Grandma." As I drove away, I didn't look back. The road ahead, full of twists and turns, felt like it was calling me to a new chapter. Settling into my new coastal town felt like a breath of fresh air. The sea became my constant companion. Its crashing waves and soft whispers brought peace to my soul. I found a small studio apartment with a view of the water. It was my little slice of heaven. Starting over wasn't easy. Finding work, making new friends, it all took effort. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for myself. Every decision I made was for my own happiness. I threw myself into freelance work, using my web design skills as a path to independence. The work came steadily, and soon I was collaborating with clients who truly respected and valued my ideas. It was nothing like the days of being belittled and dismissed. Now I was in control, building a life that finally felt like my own.